Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out Regular Revenge. Story 1. Keep acting like a child and expect me to cash your last check for you, fuck you. This is the third part of the original Come Into My House revenge story. It just keeps getting juicier. So I get a letter for my client. I am a representative payee through Social Security, saying that their old payee got caught stealing money from him. I go into the office and try to have the landlord have him come in to talk to me face to face. That doesn't work. He was asked to come into the landlord's office to talk to me about Social Security business. To which he replies, oh yeah, no, fuck that bitch. She can die in a hole. To which I text my landlord after I leave the office and see him walk up. I'm done with his childish behavior. I'm removing myself as his payee come Monday for sure. I'm done. I don't want to be legally held liable for helping him abscond his probation. I have never met someone so manipulative and entitled. I texted my client, telling him that come Monday, I'm done being his representative payee and that it was a pleasure working with him until he extorted his money out of me before I could pay his bills. And when his check comes in, I'm going to return it to SSA like I'm supposed to do, and that I have made up my mind after he extorted me out of his check on Cinco de Mayo and that SSA will be notified of that. And that because he will no longer be my client, he has to find a payee or one will be assigned to him. And come Wednesday, if he doesn't show for his probation check-in, I have no problem telling his probation officer what has been going on, especially about not returning the car he defaulted on. I know his ass will get violated. I know that will mess up his chances of getting off of probation early. Motherfucker should act like an adult instead of a manipulative entitled child. Lesson learned here? Don't bite the hand that feeds you. Story 2. My PE teacher said I was too unathletic to play sport. When I was in 8th grade, my PE teacher was mean to me for no reason. I didn't do anything, but for some reason he just targeted me. He would always make. Story 3. Wake us up at 3 am and well make it rain. This is an old story, so I'm sure my former neighbor is long gone. My wife and I, in our 20s, lived with our newborn on the second floor of an apartment building. There was an older couple, 50 to 60, downstairs. The man had some job where he came home at 3 a.m. Then he would proceed to blast his TV at maximum volume, causing the baby, and us, to cry. I asked him to please lower it. He told me he was hard of hearing. I bought him headphones. He told me he didn't like to sit so close to the TV. I bought him a long extender. He said the headphones weren't comfortable. I told him that sometimes we have to make compromises to live among other people. He refused. I reported him to building management, but all they did was write him a letter which he ignored. So I started inviting my nephews to come by and play basketball in our living room during the day when he slept. When I left for work at 6 a.m., I would lean on his doorbell for 30 seconds. He would come up later to complain, and I said when he stopped blasting his TV at 3 a.m., I would stop. He continued. One night, while the TV was blasting, I stepped into the dark bathroom and noticed some light on the floor. There was a pipe which ran down the entire building from the top floor to the bottom through every bathroom. The caulk which had been put around the pipe had worn away. I was seeing light from the bathroom downstairs. I filled a bucket with water and poured it down the hole. I heard shouting from downstairs. The next day, the super knocked to ask if we had a leak in our apartment. We told him no. That night as the TV blasted, I poured more water down the hole. He started cursing about the leak. We could hear his lady shout, "Haven't you figured it out? You blast the TV, the water comes down. Pavlov's dogs would have figured it out." She actually said that. The super came back to ask us not to pour water. We told him what was going on and he left us alone. Unfortunately, the water wasn't enough to stop this jerk. Then he got a TV antenna from a pay company like HBO. It ran from the roof right past our window and down to his apartment. The first time he blasted his TV, I climbed the fire escape and cut his cable. It was almost funny to hear him cursing the TV which was producing static. It took about a week for the cable to be repaired. The next time he blasted, I did it again. He finally got the message. Story 4. A rather catty response. Picture, if you will, a group of recently bereaved adults. The family patriarch has died, and his ashes have been returned to the grieving widow. One of the deceased's adult children, from 3 marriages ago, utterly detests her father's third, or was it fourth? One lost count, wife. When the widow and siblings propose a dignified ashes scattering, Mademoiselle Jetma Pa is very unpleasant to everyone, in particular saying some exceedingly cruel and undeserved things to widow, and rudely demands her own share for her own ceremony. I grant you she is grieving, but there are nonetheless limits. Adult daughter's representative is dispatched to the widow's house to collect the ashes. Patriarch had, many years ago, a cat, which died, as cats all must die, and which was cremated. Patriarch kept cat's ashes knocking about for ages, never getting round to scattering them. One scatters ashes in favorite places. Cat's favorite places were the couch and the bed, neither of which anyone wanted filled with ashes. It may have occurred to one of Patriarch's other children that the ashes of the cat, being Patriarch's technical property, could truthfully be described as Patriarch's ashes. A jar of cat ashes, carefully checked for giveaway teeth, collar bells, etc., may have been given to unpleasant daughter on this basis. Patriarch was rather given to this kind of dark humor. I can only say that nature and nurture both played a role here. Story 5. You're going to try to regulate ESA's bet. Housing provider won't let me get a puppy so I can have an ESA? Try me. So a bit of background, my wife and I used to live in on-campus married student housing while we were going through college. It was literally the cheapest housing in the area and was also conveniently close to basically everything we needed. About 6 months before the pandemic, we found out that a traumatic brain injury I had suffered impaired my brain's ability to process dopamine, and I was diagnosed with depression. After a while of going to therapists and doctors to get prescribed with meds that did help somewhat, it was eventually decided that I would benefit from having an emotional support animal, ESA, specifically an active breed dog, preferably one that we could get as a puppy. My wife already had her own ESA to help with her anxiety, which ended up being the exact opposite for what I needed. Quick side note, the official pet rules for the housing we lived in limited any pets to those that had gills, fins, were fully aquatic, and contained to a maximum of 20-gallon tanks. When my wife got her ESA, her anxiety caused her to go a little overboard with research to see what we would be allowed to get with the guidelines set down by federal law as well as our housing rules, and found out that our housing had a couple of weird things set up in the first place, and by the time we were in the process for my ESA, several things had been changed in the housing provider's rules. First off, we had to fill out an application to be considered able to obtain an ESA before we were supposed to purchase one, which included information about our proposed ESA. This approval process was handled by a separate entity from the housing provider altogether, through the college's Disability Resource Center, DRC, which is responsible for providing resources for anyone on campus requesting disability accommodations. For those that don't know ESA law, that's very unusual, at least based on the wording in the laws and the vast majority of cases. Secondly, we found out that the DRC had put in place new restrictions on the ESAs they would approve, and these changes went through about a year after my wife got her ESA and a year before I ended up needing an ESA. The most important change for our story had to do with a dog's age. In their updated policy, they stated that any ESA under the age of 8 months old is highly unlikely to be approved based on the high demand of attention a young puppy would demand of a student and the amount of damage a puppy could potentially incur in an apartment setting. This is kind of stipulation or rule is in direct violation of the federal laws concerning the grounds a housing provider can deny/demand the removal of an ESA. The law basically states that the only reasons an ESA can be denied or demanded be removed is if a housing provider can prove that the specific animal is causing significant damage either physically or financially to the property or other tenants, or if there is some sign of neglect, basically anything really concerning after they have the evidence and have had the animal in the first place. Blanket statement restrictions based on age, size, weight, or even breed have been outrightly stated as unlawful reasons for denying or removing an ESA from a property. We saw this rule, and we knew the laws supporting our rights for obtaining an ESA, and we decided to go ahead and get a puppy. And so we ended up getting an 8-week-old poodle mix puppy to minimize allergies and have something with enough energy to get me working again. We explained all of our reasoning for getting a puppy in my application for approval to the DRC. This application also had questions that were either nearly breaching doctor/patient confidentiality, or were blatantly asking extremely personal questions to healthcare providers along the lines of what about your patient's disability makes you believe they would benefit from an ESA, or what is the nature of your patient's disability that would necessitate an ESA. Really scummy, painful questions. The way they had their approval process set up, it made it seem like these questions were absolutely necessary in order to receive approval to obtain an ESA, although they claimed it was not necessary despite always pushing applicants to submit it along with a doctor's note/recommendation. A bit more than 2 weeks later, I get their response asking why my wife's ESA can't serve as my ESA, to which I have to send them documentation explaining that he had been trained in calming my wife, and my needs are quite different, to which we waited another week before they then decided I was approved for getting an ESA and that I would need to submit more info on what kind of dog I was planning on getting. At this point, it had taken long enough for them to get back to us that we had already gotten our puppy, and life was starting to get better for me. So we sent in the final bit of the application, the info on our puppy and how we were going to be housing her, crate info, training regiment, vaccine record, etc. It took a further 2 more weeks for them to finally get back to us. Your request has been denied due to the age of the dog you have submitted. Those words hurt me more than I care to admit. We didn't think that they would be stupid enough to actually deny her based off of age, especially with all of the training plans and other information we gave them to show them we knew what we were doing with a puppy. So after we took a day to calm our outage, we emailed them back. We made sure to get everything in writing, sharing with them a link to the page that contained the exact law they were in danger of breaking. I even included a screenshot of the highlighted paragraph to show them we had done our research. Interestingly enough, their response to that came back the same day. The head of the department was the one who responded to our email then, haughtily starting that he knew more about ESA law than we did, and that there wasn't anything we could do to change their decision to deny my ESA. Remember how I said we already had my ESA? That was also allowed according to the law. An ESA is technically allowed in the housing during the decision process, although it's not really recommended. Well, we decided to give them one more chance, asking the director to really go and read the law, since it was obvious he had not even read half the email we had sent him previously, stating that we were ready to start submitting a claim with the Housing and Urban Development Agency, which was the department of the federal government that handles a number of things, including enforcing the ESA laws I've been referencing this entire time. We also said that we were ready to also obtain legal representation for this whole process, as we knew that retaliation may happen. Some people were acting a bit power-hungry and would potentially ignore any anti-retaliation clauses that might trigger as soon as we submitted the claim to the HUD. The email we got back was almost word for word the same as the previous one, stating he knew more than us and that we could be evicted if we didn't remove our new puppy from the property, either through rehoming her or moving out. Now, my wife has the mama bear trigger. As soon as she read the threat that the head of the DRC sent us, she immediately submitted the claim to the HUD that we were experiencing illegal harassment and being unlawfully denied my ESA based on housing rules that were in violation of the ESA laws. We knew as soon as this was sent in, that any retaliation against us from that moment on would end up landing the entire college in really hot water, so we felt very protected, and very powerful in moving forward from there. We then reached out to our local disability law center, since they provided free legal advice and potentially pro bono legal representation. They were extremely kind, and we were soon put in touch with an expert with the kind of cases that we had on our hands, and they were more than happy to have us begin having any of the correspondence from the college concerning the case ESA go through them. The head of the DRC of course tried to not communicate with us through our friendly lawyer, who very quickly realized that the DRC was not going to back down, even with the investigation from the HUD ongoing. We were informed that nothing else could happen until the HUD could finish their investigation and could then turn over their findings to our lawyer and the lead for the investigation/mediation. During that time, with the non-retaliation clause in place, I was able to enjoy raising and training my puppy in the relative safety of our apartment. Once the investigation was completed, we received word that yes, they did find several items in which the college/housing provider was in violation of, to which our lawyer then began meeting with the college's legal team and the mediator to work out a quick settlement. A mediation date was set, and since it was during the social distancing time, everything was to be done virtually, which should have made it easy for everyone to attend. Nope. No one from the college showed up for that first mediation, and both the mediator lawyer were fuming. Our lawyer later found out that the legal team had claimed that there was nothing illegal or nothing wrong with anything in the policy concerning ESAs. Come to find out later that they were taking the word of the DRC director at face value, and he was lying his ass off to everyone. A second mediation was scheduled, and this time, a member of the college legal team attended, and we were finally able to come to an agreement without having to escalate the issue to the court system. The aftermath: turns out the HUD was seriously not happy with the college, and the reparations they were requiring consisted of paying damages to us, paying our lawyer his fees, a 6 months deadline to change the policies, all of the employees that deal with housing and all of the DRC had to take extensive ADA training, and we were required to not try to sue the college for the same issue again. So in the end, I got to keep my dog, got paid to keep her, and we seriously spat bet in the DRC's face when they said they knew more than an anxiety-ridden wife lol. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.